Welcome to the eCom Collab Club podcast, where operators, risk takers, and battle-tested founders drop the lessons that cost them time, money, and their sanity, and share what actually works so you don't have to pay the same price. Hosted by Peter Gardner and Adam Pearce, founders of the eCom Collab Club and Blend Commerce, the Shopify CRO agency, and proudly sponsored by OmniSend. Email and SMS marketing so good, it's boring.
So guys, you know when you're on LinkedIn and you see that eCom founder boasting about 10 times growth, million monthly visitors, well, when they look to sell, I'm sure they've got a pretty dazzling deck. And they post it obviously proudly on LinkedIn as well. But the problem is when you get a single due diligence call that uncovers real picture, there's often the wave of margins, a rising churn, and frankly, an untested supply chain. Now, when the valuation slides south and the deal dies, well, you don't tend to get the same dopamine boost in LinkedIn content anymore. So how do you avoid the same fate? Well, today, guys, we want to cut the vanity, fortify the fundamentals, and show you how to build a business investors can't ignore. And our guest, Elizabeth Gooch MBE, is going to be doing that with us today. So, Elizabeth, welcome.
Morning, both. How are you?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good. Good to see you.
You too.
Awesome to be on, guys. This is exciting. We're back after the little hiatus that Adam had in the hills, and I was down on the sunny Gold Coast. It wasn't too sunny, but it was good. Rich was covering off nicely for us. But Elizabeth, awesome to have you on. I must be honest, this is a topic that I feel like I know next to nothing on. So I'm really looking forward to actually getting stuck in here with you today and actually learning a lot more about what all of this is all about. But for anyone who hasn't yet read your LinkedIn or done a little Google search or done some research into who you are, what are the numbers that kept you up when you were growing EG Solutions? You know, what's your background? How did you get here today? I know you were dropping some knowledge bombs just before we jumped on in here and gave us a few quick little stories. So,
well,
yeah, share with everybody else?
Yeah, fine to do that. Well, as I mentioned, brought up by my grandmother in a council house. I was expelled from school. It's a bit dramatic to say that, but I was one of those conversations where they said, "You're not suited to this, are you? I think it would be better if you go," which is the same thing, isn't it? It's just a polite way of saying, "Please leave." So, you know, actually setting up in business was about survival rather than anything else. It wasn't necessarily the plan, but you know, went into, you know, got various jobs, and then in the end just decided to set up my own business. So what did I do? I built a technology company from my bedroom, started it with £1, built a technology product that actually created a new market space that's now worth $3 billion annually at least. Listed it on AIM, and then so we IPO'd on AIM, and then it was acquired by an American software house in 2017. We sold product in 50 countries throughout the world. We had offices in 5, and most of the big household names in financial services, utilities, telcos, anything like that, probably still using our software today. So that's the background. What kept me up at night? Always cash. Even when listed, I mean, we had a lot of squeaky bum moments, and we had a couple of those when we were listed as well. So cash was definitely king all through. Customer delivery and the value we were delivering to customers was the second thing, actually. And the reason for that is we invented a sort of new business model of payment by results. So we didn't get paid unless we delivered, and we got paid a percentage of the benefits that we actually delivered to customers. So we needed a tried, tested and proven model to do that. So I was always really are we on the nail with what we're delivering for customers? Obviously winning new customers, building a recurring revenue book and retaining those customers. Gross and net margin became more important post-listing. But all of those numbers were still, you know, what an IPO business needs, the same as what a startup needs to focus on, really. They're the same numbers, just bigger. The one thing I didn't focus on was the share price, because I learned over time that that was as disappointing as my bathroom scales. Every time I look, it's the wrong thing I want to see.
I've got the same problem.
What we learned actually was if you keep doing the right things, the share price will look after itself, although that no longer holds true, to be fair. So yeah, IPO is not necessarily a great route to go down nowadays. But yeah, that's my background, and that's what kept me up at night.
Awesome. So EG Solutions, you've mentioned that you were building products for people. What specifically? What? Like, give us an example of something that you guys built.
So what made us successful was absolute focus on a target ICP, and our target ICP was the operations manager, customer services manager, the person who's looking after all of the customer requests that are coming in.
Okay.
And in truth, in most of those organizations that I've described, they're the least important person in the business. Sales, finance, all sorts of things are more important than actually, or were when we started looking after the actual customer. So we focused on them, focused on the problems that they had, and building a solution that would solve those problems that they would pay for. And that's where the business model came in, just to convince people to actually use it to start with. It's like, well, why would I buy from you? And it was like, well, we'll guarantee the results that you'll get. So, we were doing that way back when we first started the company. So, that focus was really important. Then obviously winning and retaining customers, very, very important too. But we built a community of customers. So at the beginning, we started targeting, well, we didn't target, we sold to anybody. It's like, we want money, just give me money. And then realised that actually we needed to focus, because you can't be everything to everyone. So we focused on a couple of sectors, became the go-to, became the specialist in that sector, and then spun out from there. So winning customers, building that community so we could get more, delivering on our promises, and making 65% gross margin enabled us to bootstrap for a very long time. So we made sure every sale was at least 65% gross margin, and then that would enable us to develop product and not necessarily need to raise. And in truth, there wasn't the ability to raise so much for software, believe it or not, back then. No community, no accelerators, nothing like that. So everything we learned was out of books from mostly US authors. Make it up, make mistakes, learn from it, pivot, off you go, do it again.
Yeah. So did you raise any money? Like, did you do any rounds before you IPO'd, or is it just bootstrap?
No. And you wouldn't do that, and you wouldn't be allowed to do that now. But at that particular time, we were described as a Warren Buffett business, actually, because we'd got all the right fundamentals, and the darlings of AIM, until we worked out that our revenue model wasn't predictable enough, and led to a few profit warnings along the way. So we had to learn from those as well, and keep improving things and scaling. So no raising before that. Went straight bang onto the public market, in the eye of the public and the press and the media and analysts and all of that jazz.
Awesome. And tell us about the MBE.
What, my boiled egg? Oh yeah,
yes,
okay. I call it my boiled egg because I'm not pretentious at all, but it's for services to industry. I know it's for services to industry. I was a real shock. Obviously, did a lot to help other businesses trying to export, because we were export champions, and did a lot to help other businesses do the same thing. So on the back of that, got awarded the
services
MBE
to industry and
2012.
export.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. So is that with EG Solutions?
Yeah.
Also back to the work with that. And is that when you finally exited as well?
No, 2017. So since then, I've worked with founders, startup, scale-up companies, help them grow, get investment, build value for themselves, actually. So I'm really passionate about that. And the reason for that is most people that build big businesses and exit, certainly when I was in business, there was a lot of people that could have helped that didn't want to, because they were worried about reputational risk, and they want to play at the big end. They want to, their ego and all that. And I'm like, 90% of startups fail in 5 years.
Yeah,
it's solved. That problem is solvable. Not all of it, but a lot of it is solvable. So I'll do my bit and try and help in that area. So that's what I do.
awesome.
Oh, Elizabeth, I need a bit of therapy first, because I want to talk
We all
about.
do that, darling.
I've had plenty of it. I need even more. But on that kind of valuations front, I have stopped watching now, but I used to watch Dragon's Den a lot, and it used to drive me absolutely freaking nuts when you would get a founder coming up and basically asking for a percentage of their company, which they had valued on some magical LSD trip on a Saturday night. Like I honestly drove me crazy, the valuations it came up with. From your experience, and you might tell me I'm wrong, you might tell me those people are absolutely right, and I'm all ears, but when you see founders thinking about the value of their company and they're pitching that to a potential investor to either sell it or get investment, what's the biggest mistake they tend to make when they try and put that valuation together?
Okay, 2 or 3 things. First of all, the market sets the price in the end, so it's what you can get for it. It's the same as in sales. You whatever you want to sell it at, the market will decide what it wants to pay. So I think that's the first rule. The second rule is chasing a high valuation, I think, is a big mistake. And we all want it. I wanted it. But when you've experienced a down round or your share price falling because you haven't lived up to the hype, and initially when you first raise, there's a lot of promise and hope built into that share price. And depending on how well you've told that story and the magic dust that you've sprinkled in order to get investment, however well you've done that, if you've done that really well and you've got a high valuation, you've then got to live up to that. And I work with founders who have done that, and they, then don't deliver. And invariably you don't, because business is not predictable at these early stages. So then you have a down round, and then everybody looks at it and goes, well, what's happened here? It's not such a great story. So I think it's more about raising the money that you need to raise, give away or dilute for the percentage that you really need to. Don't go mad, and don't be greedy at that stage. And the expression that my old chairman used to use with me is, let's creep up on success. And it's really nice to see this nice story growing of a business that's just going from strength to strength. I think the other thing is everybody's in a rush to get this done, and a lot of this comes from investments, to be honest, where it's like, we're putting our money in, we want to make a 10 times return in 3 to 5 years, a hockey stick like this. But experience actually tells you it takes 10 years to build a business to anything that's of a reasonable size, for it to be sustainable and continue thereafter. And I think that's probably adding to a lot of the failure, actually, is that people are rushing. So I think chasing too high a valuation and not having the fundamentals in place to deliver it is the big one.
Yeah, because that's what I was also interested in, is like, when we see it a lot on LinkedIn, when people are talking about different raises that they've done, or valuations that they're kind of putting together. When obviously you have that situation where either you're trying to get fundraising or you are trying to sell, do you think that a lot of the time that there is a genuine need for that cash when you kind of talk to those type of businesses, or do people tend to, I guess, overinflate what they think they need versus the reality of actually what they do need?
Let's start from the beginning, and this is changing currently, actually, but we've gone through a wave of, the first thought is, I'm building a business, I need to raise. And my model is, I'm building a business, I need to prove that I can sell this profitably and build a business, and then I'll think about raising. So slightly different order. So I think there's too much of a rush to raise too quickly. And I think that puts a lot of pressure into the system. I think the reason it's changing is because there has been a lot of government-backed investment around up until last sort of 12, 18 months. That's moved up market. So the lower end, the startup end, have got no choice actually but to go out and raise money from customers. And if you're raising money, the cheapest money you can get is from sales. The second from debt, because you've built a business that's got some profit in it, or you've got some recurring revenue in it. The last thing I think you should be looking at is investors, but I do think it's the last thing you look at, not the first thing. And that we have gone through a phase of people thinking straight away that they need to raise and need to be out there. And there's a lot of accelerators around encouraging young people on it, and it's not really real.
Mm. I mean, it strikes me, that thinking about what you hear and see in the market at the moment is there seems to be kind of two extremities. One is, kind of wearing that badge of honor of look how much we've raised. And the other one is that kind of badge of honor of look, we're completely bootstrapped, we haven't taken any money. There doesn't seem to be this kind of sweet spot in the middle where people are saying, look, we're being smart with what we're doing. Do you think that's fair, or do you think it's just the fact that I'm not going to be seeing those people that are being smart in the middle?
I think bootstrapping is smart. If you can build a business, a lot of the founders that I work with get to 1 million bootstrapped, and believe it or not, they're hard to find. So when you do find them, I want to try and build a relationship with them and work with them because they're very exciting businesses. But they've got to 1 million bootstrapped. Breaking through from the 1 to the 2 is where it starts to get tricky. I think there's sort of the ceilings where breaking through becomes difficult. So to your point about smart, built a sustainable business, and they could carry on at that level if they wanted to, but they're actually saying, no, I need to take a bit of money in order to scale. And as I say, the debt is a good way of actually looking at that, because it focuses the mind on return on that debt. And I like to get founders to go, let's keep that separate in our minds about what we've actually borrowed or raised and what we're spending it on and what return we're getting on versus the underlying sort of metrics in the business as well. So that's where I think. And is there a smart medium? I think the smart medium is people who've borrowed a bit or just raised a bit from friends and family or just taken a little bit. But you don't have to go the whole hog and give up 30 to 40% of your company and raise 1 million and promise you're going to do this, that, and the other when you haven't proven you can sell it. And breaking out of founder sales and single person business is one of the hardest things to do, I think. I think that's why we have such a problem of
going back to what Adam was saying earlier about obviously how Dragon's Den, and obviously, as a viewer, we get to see things and you go, a lot of those people are coming on and they're actually profitable. They don't need investment. They can bootstrap, but a lot of them say, look, we don't need the cash, but we want somebody to buy in because we want that relationship or we want that person's connections to help with it. Is that something that you see as a very strategic way to go and actually raise funds?
I mean, why do most of them go on to Dragon's Den? I mean, you listen to the valuations and what they give up for the small amount of money, and you're like, really? Most of them are going on there for the publicity and the PR, aren't they? And if you look at the stats of who actually takes the investment afterwards, I think that bears it out. And a lot of those businesses go on to do well on the back of that PR. Why would you take money? I think it's helpful to take some investment and start pegging your investment, your valuation, peg your valuation. If you take investment from outside, particularly if it's a professional investor involved, you actually get a number for your business rather than something that you have concocted yourself. So you can go to people and say, well, my business is worth X, Y, Z. But if somebody's put money in at a certain valuation, that's the case. I mean, the other smart reason is you might want to take a bit of money off the table yourself as well. So that's another good reason why you should. But it's back to that creep upon success thing. And if you do raising at the right price, getting the right investors on that journey with you helps build your valuation story over time. So those would be the reasons that you would do it.
Awesome. Okay. So there's good books like Build to Sell, and then obviously what we're talking about here is getting IPO ready. These sound like big lofty goals. Like, for like you said, most businesses are micro businesses run by one or two people. They're making 1 million if they're lucky. They're not looking for that IPO. But in practical terms, what should IPO ready mean for an early stage e-com brand agency tech partner, just to get the lessons from that?
Yeah. Okay. So what are IPO investors looking for? They're looking for sustainable businesses that will scale. So they're looking to low risk, plenty of upside. Okay, that's what they're looking for. So they look at what's called the fundamentals. Now, nobody actually says to you, this is what the fundamentals are. You don't know. we went around our investors hearing this all the time. Oh yeah, you've got good fundamentals. Oh yeah, working on your fundamentals. You kept hearing this all the time. What are these bloody fundamentals? So we actually got them wrote down, and it's 9 things, 9 core areas, actually, not 9 single things. Behind each one of them, there's about 5 or 6 other things. There's 9 headings, if you like, of things that IPO investors actually look for. And if you tick all of those boxes, you know, that's what they're looking for you to do. Tick, tick, tick. Do you tick that? And then there's all of the other decision making on the top. Interestingly, those 9 fundamentals are the same as the growth drivers or the things that other investors look for at other stages of business. And if you look at the hierarchy of investors, you have sort of angels, friends and family, angels, VC investors, PE, IPO. What's actually happening is each layer of investor, perhaps excluding friends and family and angels, but from VC upwards, they're looking to appeal to the next level because they want an exit at some point as well.
Gotcha.
So you take IPO requirements at the top, and they have cascaded down through the investment community through those other levels. And then you get angels who have exited founders like me and so on and so forth, who also know what those things are. So they're starting to look for the same things as well. So the words I use are, the fundamentals for IPO are the same for every business. It's the same, but different. The only thing that happens is the standard that's expected and the rules applied to that get higher as you go through. But I also encourage a lot of my founders to try and take a little bit of professional money if they can, because it helps the business to grow up. It helps the business to run more professionally. And, then when people are looking at it from not just a DD point of view, but a valuation and an assessment point of view, the business looks more grown up and more valuable. So that's a good tactic. And also read my book that I'm writing. At some point it will come out, but there you go, when you mention books, but there you go.
Well, I'm hoping that the 9 fundamentals are in there.
The 9
sounds
fundamentals
like
are it, and it's all about sustainable scaling, so that we can, that we've gone through rapid scaling culture of raising, more so in the US, but raising millions and then falling flat on our faces. So, there is absolutely nothing wrong with building what I call a small giant, and I'm pinching that from Bo Bellingham's book, because it's an absolutely brilliant book for everyone to read. You don't have to be big. You don't have to be growing rapidly to be a great business. There's nothing wrong with building a sustainable business that looks after your community, your lifestyle, your customers, all of that sort of stuff. So that's the essence of it. How to stop 90% failing. That's the goal.
Yeah. Can you walk us through some of the 9 fundamentals?
Yeah, sure. Very easy. So having a clear strategy and the KPIs that underpin that story. Very clear proposition. Mentioned that a little bit earlier, which is, who is the target? Who's the person with the problem? What's the problem you're solving? Who for? Will they pay for it? Will they buy from you? Those type of things. So proposition, very important. Your growth engine is 2 of those things, which is customer acquisition and customer success. How do you acquire them at the right price? And then how do you look after them, retain them forever, upsell, cross-sell, increase their profitability to the business, and so on and so forth. So there's the other 2. The team that you actually put around you. Mastering money, being really great with finances, and that's not just about spurting a P&L out of a zero. It's actually, forecasting, cash flow, modeling, those sorts of things, looking at scenarios, etc. Your operational edge is really important. So what got you here won't get you there. Your processes that you start with probably don't exist. It's utter chaos. If you think that's going to enable you to grow, that's not. So we need to be scalable and smart in our way we actually do our business. Product, not last but least, but actually product often leads in many of the businesses that I work in, and not all the other things, and then they wonder why their business is not succeeded. It applies very well in deep tech and life sciences type things where product has to lead, but for most businesses the other things should lead and products should follow. And last but by no means least, the driving force, which is the founder themselves. And if you want to scale your business, you have to scale yourself first, because if you're not willing to scale, then your business won't scale, and businesses tend to grow to the level of capability of the founder. So if you're not willing to grow, you're sort of pegging your growth. So those are the 9 things, and those are the 9 things that they look at. Which is the priority depends on the business, depends on the investor. Then I don't think there's any one of them that is more important than the other, to be honest. I think they are interchangeable, but that's the 9.
You warned me before this that I'm not allowed to ask you pick one, but yeah, pick one.
Pick one. Oh, well, for me, it has to be proposition. Has to be, because if you, I receive pitch decks and it takes me half an hour to understand. And in fact, I've worked with some businesses, taking me 3 months to work out what they actually do. That is too complicated. You need to aim for a reading age of 6, and people need to understand quickly what it is that you do, who you do it for, and why they should buy from you. So for me, the proposition is what will stop people scaling. And, I work with clients who struggle to scale because their messaging is not clear. Who they're solving the problem for is not clear. How they're solving it is not clear. That to me is the key that unlocks the future.
Yeah. I mean, I can resonate with that, and I think Adam will probably agree. It's, we went through a big process with Blend, and we were a design dev agency, a typical design dev agency, and we did everything. We did Facebook ads, we did, you name it. We did that service, and slowly but surely we just started moving things off of what we did. And, you doubled down on the things that you do well. And eventually it was so much easier to explain to people of what we did. I think even probably three years ago, they were still like, hell, so what are you guys doing? You're like, all these things. Now it's easy. CRO agency. Very simple. People go, okay, what does that mean? We help people buy now, buy more, buy again. That's it. Like this, it's that easy for us to explain exactly what we do now. And it just makes things so much easier with both marketing, sales, actually incorporating the team, your processes and everything. So I love that, the fact that you're nailing that one as your one, and I'm glad that you did
that is my one. I mean, the founder and the team has to come pretty closely second, because I think you have to work with great people as well. And I'll tell you my story. I was definitely one of those founders that thought they were the bee's knees, and I was a founder that actually pegged my growth until I just got frazzled and just couldn't cope with anything and realized I had to let go. That was sort of 1 to 2 million. At 4 million, it happened again as you go up the journey. And then one day my team just locked me in a room and said, can you stop interfering, just back off. And I think you change your role as well. So you start off as a player, you're hands-on, you rolled up your sleeves, you're in with the team. You then become a player manager, you then become a manager, and then finally you become a leader. And I know that leadership flows all the way through, but the proportion changes. It was only when I got to be a leader, had a lot of input about leadership, that I actually learnt the value of not being the loudest voice in the room and having really great people around me that could really run my business. And it's never perfect, and there's always, you think somewhere's perfect and then it wobbles a bit and you have to go and help it out. But that's what leadership is. It's actually about shoring that up. But I think those proposition, your systems and your processes, those are the things that will stop you from scaling for sure.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Focus, I think, is the word, and you just nailed that about your business. I think absolute focus, and I do get it. For the first 3 years, you probably take stuff from everywhere, and I actually think that's right in a way, because you start off with a vision, and you take it to the customers, and the customers make it into what solves their problem. And we used to use this as a development process for our software. We'd actually take our prototype of product to early adopter clients and say, we know this is what you want because you've all told us it's what you want. Next, the market say it's what we're not. How do we make this the best value to you? And we would go through that period of working with them to finish it off. So, you know, businesses are spending lots of money on bells and whistles in product. You know, you're developing a square wheel, probably. You need to actually get out to the customer and let the customer tell you what it is that they want. So I get it. In the first 3 years, you might set off on a journey and it turns into a different journey, but not long after that, you have to start to focus, I think, in order to get real traction.
Awesome. Thanks.
I was going to ask here. So thinking about, you know, I mentioned in the introduction there about pitch decks, and it's kind of become recently, look, a lot of people have started to share their pitch decks on LinkedIn, and I don't know whether that's for ego, probably is, but never mind. I think if you are looking at an e-commerce business and you're looking at their pitch deck, you go through obviously the deck, you look through different slides. The slides, there's claims, there's, you know, a design sin that is made. What's the one thing that when you see, like, automatically just kills your interest from an investment perspective?
Complicated language, jargon. I want to see a pitch deck, page 2, cover that tells me what it's trying to do. Page 2 tells me 5 or 6 bullet points. Who's this business? What's it achieved? Where's it going next? What is the investment that it's actually looking for? And what does it want to spend it on? And then if I like that, then I'll read into the rest. And if the next pages then start to get really complicated, I'm like, not reading that anymore. And I don't think that applies. I don't think that applies to every business, whether it's e-com or not. You know, that's the thing, really. And that has an advantage to founders if they do that, because a lot of the time you can be pitching, you might not have your deck with you, but you know what those 6 bullet points are. You might be in an elevator with somebody and somebody says, oh yeah, I'm a, you know, part of a family office or whatever. Pitch. Know what those 6 points are. Go in. That's what we're raising. That's what we want. Are you interested? You know, 6-minute pitch, go to a pitch session. They go through all of these slides, all this complicated language, and then never get to what it is that they're actually asking for. So the ask for me and the investment proposition needs to be right up front. Plain and simple. Treat me like I'm 6 because I'm brand new to this business. I don't know what it does.
Yeah.
And then if that interests me, then I'll open the rest of the pages, and you need to follow on in the same style. If it then cascades into whatever,
Because do you think
you lose me?
Because I think, yeah, when I look at some of the things that I've seen, you know, particularly people sharing, it kind of strikes me that sometimes when brands put together these decks, they get very intent on trying to show the complexity of that business, trying to show the uniqueness of that business. But I guess ultimately what you're saying is, from an investment point of view, you don't really care too much about that. What you're trying to see is there a clear path to you saying that you are going to get a return on your cash? So all of that kind of, you know, look, my business is this, is that, you know, it's complex, this, that, and the other. I guess it's kind of irrelevant, isn't it?
I'm one of those weird people that's less interested in product, as you probably heard from the 9 fundamentals, actually, because product can always be fixed. And when people get wrapped up in the technical explanation of what their product does, they're losing the investor, because the investor knows that product can be fixed generally. I mean, there are occasions where product lets the business down completely, but for most part, investors know product will need to change as you go forward. What they're looking for is, can I get my return from this business? And is the vision there? I've got the KPIs. I mean, the KPIs, I think, particularly in eCom, are really important, because in all of my businesses, I said, whatever the target is, we need the KPIs that underpin that story. It's the engine that will deliver the numbers. And you want an investor to look at those numbers and go, okay, if this business is doing this now, if I put, 1 million, 2 million, whatever, into this engine, that's what they're going to be able to deliver. And that's what they want to be able to see. So, loads and loads of bloody explanation about product. It's like, okay, we're going to spend my money on building more of that then. That's, and is that what they want? I don't think so. Excuse my language, by the way.
No, it's usually a lot worse. I know. I'm glad. On the flip side, then, obviously, I know you mentioned obviously about sort of having that clarity. Is there anything on the other side where you're saying, look, I just wish that people would put this thing in there? Like, you know, do people tend to miss things off about key team members? Do people, you know, miss things off about competition? Like, is there anything that people sort of don't tend to point in, saying, look, I wish we just bloody had this thing in there?
No, the numbers, but there's a 50-50 on numbers in pitch decks. Actually, I talked to some investors who say you shouldn't put your numbers in your pitch deck. But to me, I want to see the numbers, and I want to see the numbers with the key things that an investor would look for already thought about by the business. Not come to me with an idea and then I have to say, well, what are your numbers? And they go away for 3 months to work that out. You know, it shows that they're actually investor ready if those numbers and that forecast is there. You want to know, you know, what's your revenue, what's your recurring revenue, yeah, what's your EBITDA, you know, gross margin, blah, 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 all those, whatever the numbers are that's relevant for that business. I want to see that forecast laid out like that. That to me says this business is, here's my thinking. A pitch deck is not the start of getting investor ready, it's the end. And getting investor ready means you've put all the thinking in behind those no more than 12 slides that you need to actually tell your story to an investor. So, you know, you need to have gone through what is the proposition, as we talked about, you know, who the customers that we've already won, market size and competition at least thought about. Those are probably two of the most hysterical slides. The finances and so on and so forth, you know, team in there as well. But that you've worked all of that out before you put the pitch deck together, not put something together and then go and do your finances afterwards. There's one or two exceptions to that, and the one exception is where the team has done it before. So if it's a known quantity and the team has raised before, they can very likely go to see investors probably without a pitch deck and say, I'm going to do this next. Are you interested? And they'll have a short list of people who are ready, waiting for, yeah, tell me what it is that you're doing. That's the one exception, but there's, you know, less than 1% of those succeed. So it's rare, isn't it? The majority, you've got to earn the right to get the cash. So you've got to put the effort in, and it's the end result of getting investor ready.
Good stuff. Thank you. Pete, over to you.
So let's move along the line now a bit. And founders often cheer when they receive a term sheet. But what hidden clauses should make them pause, rather call their lawyer instead of popping that champagne?
Well, majority of term sheets will have hidden clauses. Let's start there, because the clause detail actually comes in when you get the documents, and you don't get those documents until you're further down the line. So I think it's good to have a lawyer or somebody experienced in it to help you to ask them to ask those questions. And what are those actually going to be, and flush them out if they're not already there. Well, obviously, deal shape is one of those things to look at. And there's quite a preference at the moment for some reason, convertible loan notes as part of the deal, which have got, you know, all sorts of terms on in terms of interest payments, etc., when those interest payments are made. So let's look at the structure of the deal. And essentially what I'm saying is we need to move from generic terms into, let's get some specifics if we can, and at least understand what they are. Liquidation preferences, that would be my second one. The other one where I work with founders quite a lot on is the good leaver, bad leaver clauses. You know, you'll often see a line that says, we will need good leaver, bad leaver clauses. Well, okay, can we find out what those are? A lot of the time you get told no, and so you listen to the words and decide from there, and you've got to wait for the docs to actually go there. Other two, step-in rights would be another one, but again, probably later on in the process where you find out what those step-in rights are, and the warranties, those type of things. Also preemption rights. Those are key things that, you know, that I look at. I think it's a lot more to do with, when you get that term sheet though, it's about cultural fit, because you're going to be with an investor for a long time. They're going to be with you. So you've got to actually concentrate on that part and the relationship side, and get the heads of terms as comfortable enough so you're happy to sign that to go into the exclusivity and get the documents, because you won't get the documents until you do that. But I think that's the cultural fit is really important.
Yeah. So the term sheet, and from my understanding, this is like the engagement. This is the engagement ring before the marriage. You want to then go and get the verbals of what you're going to expect off the back of that term sheet. Get the verbals from them before you get into the marriage.
Yeah, at least. Try and get them into the term sheet, but if you can't, at least get an understanding of where they're going to come from.
Yeah. What happens if you don't do this and you don't investigate, and then you get to the agreement stage? Are you saying that you're almost too late to then back out? But
well, a lot of companies are. A lot of companies leave it too late to raise. So by the time, and the raise always takes longer than you think. So by the time you get to the stage of signing the docs, you're on the hook. You need the cash, want it now.
So
So your back's against the wall. You gotta sign it and get the cash and live with the consequences, and it can be painful.
Yeah, so those then unfavorable terms in the final agreement is just like you've almost got to suck it up and just take it.
Yeah. But also, I'm going to say to you that the signing of the agreement and getting the cash is not the end of the process, it's the start of the process. And delivering what you've promised in order to get that money is the most important thing. And everyone said to me, God, you must have been mad listing all that administration, etc., etc. I'm going to say to you, it was 6 months of work to get listed. Once we were listed, it was about 4 weeks of the year. Obviously more work for finance than for me, but it was about 4 weeks of the year returning to investors and telling the story. A bit of extra work of building relationships for future investors and all of that sort of stuff. But if we needed any extra money, it was an easy-ish process. You go back to the investors that you've got and you go through your broker, etc., etc. It's not the full-time job like founders are going through nowadays, and that is a huge distraction. So when I work with founders on raising, I'm like, concentrate on that business, keep the numbers going, keep on target, don't stop the engine. Let me work on this part, or I'll work with someone else in your business, your finance director or whatever, to do that. But it's so much more distracting now, and so businesses are going like this. So they come out of the gate with the money in the bank and they go, where am I? Okay, now I've got to start doing the things to grow, and you should have started those beforehand. So there's usually a lull before they kick off again. And you need to focus on being married, not getting married, to use your analogy. Definitely got to stay married and deliver what you've said. Not a skill that I've actually got, but there you go.
So how can early missteps with your cap table then come back to haunt you if you're an eCom brand a couple of funding rounds later? What's the missteps you can do to mess up your cap table at that point?
Well, obviously giving away too much too early. So that is, obvious. And when you're desperate for cash and people can smell it, that is fact, then they will do that. They will, lowball your valuation, take as much as they can. Obviously, you're looking to maintain some semblance of control. I was very fortunate. I had 68% of the shares after IPO, which went down to 17% over time. So if you can do it at IPO, then you can do it in earlier stages. So cash flow forecasting is really important to work out when you're going to need that money and raise in good time. And currently I'm saying 9 to 12 months you've got to allow to make sure you get that cash in. So if you're thinking 3 months before you need the cash that you're going to get it, you're probably not. And then you end up lowball valuation, and then you end up losing a lot of your equity. So I think you need to plan out your cap table, get an advisor and help you plan out your cap table. What is it I'm going to need to raise to deliver what I want to build? How much am I going to let go over that time? And cap table planning is the thing that a lot of lawyers who specialize in this work in corporate finance will do with you, and it's cheap, really saves you a lot of loss later down the line. So that's one thing. And then those liquidation preferences and preemption rights are other things that come and bite you in the arse, excuse the expression, at the next rounds. And I saw one founder who got a high valuation and a decent percentage dilution, raised 2.5 million, didn't deliver, had to go back to the table within the first year. Next round, 4 times liquidation preferences, which means he had to sell above 15 million to be able to make anything at all. And so, you know, taking what you need to take and deliver what you promise you're going to do is a really important. Don't get, it's not about vanity raising, it's actually about take what you need, only what you need, and then deliver what you say, and concentrate on that really hard.
I mean, onto that vanity front, and I think looking at sort of beyond the vanity metrics, and I know I was sort of taking a piss out of these people who go on Dragon's Den earlier on, and I think that there's probably a reason behind that. But if you are thinking about specifically an e-commerce brand, so, you know, I'm talking about an e-commerce retailer, rather than kind of taking that revenue level that we see on Dragon's Den and then multiplying that out by 4, which, anyway, what are the numbers that actually tend to matter more than that top line revenue number, specifically for an e-com brand? Yeah, so interestingly, I think it's exactly the same for tech, where I specialize. So I don't think it's that much different. There's a twist, because the type of revenue in e-com will be different to the type of revenue in a SaaS business. But lifetime value of the customer, I think, is really important. And the one thing that investors will look at is concentration of revenues in my sector, less so in e-commerce. So having a good base of customers with long lifetime value and high retention is good. And retention, obviously, in e-com world is about repeat business, but also, you know, community as well, which I'll come back to in a second. So lifetime value, retention, average order value, customer acquisition cost, gross margin, and then community, as I mentioned earlier. And I think that's a more modern thing, actually, a more recent thing. Building a community of buyers that stick with you seems to be the order of the day. And in there, they're looking at things like, you know, their contribution within. It's not just about having followers and a community. It's actually about what does that actually do and add value to your business. So contribution ratios, you know, how much do they actually contribute within the community, or are they just passive? And do you get any sales through that community? I think that's definitely a thing that's increasing from an e-com world. And certainly I mentioned to you earlier, working with Paul on apps that actually do that, and I think there's a lot of interest in building that. And I suppose the other thing as well is there something like an underrated signal perhaps in a business that always makes kind of the more serious buyers probably sit up and pay attention? I think it depends. Yeah, we were chatting about this earlier. I think there's some pixie dust. So you can have the 9 fundamentals, you can have them all perfect. You can have the KPIs and they all look fantastic, but it's still a personal decision. It's not if you tick all these boxes, you get the cash. It's not that. There's still some pixie dust that still needs to be with that business, because less than 1% of businesses that go for funding actually succeed. So what is that pixie dust? I think it is story. I think story is probably the thing. It's less of a KPI and it's more of a, okay, all of this looks great, but so what? And it's that thing that goes, yeah, actually, it's that. And it can be other things. So it can be team members, you know, it could be a team member in there that's done fantastically, wonderfully before for the investors and so on. But it has to be a sprinkling of pixie dust that you can't control. And I think getting story right, what you stand for. I think values have become very important. We had them in my business. And I don't mean, excuse the expression, brand bollocks. I mean values that are really matter to the people who you're selling to, that they can sign up to. You know, the expression Paul uses actually is belonging is more important than branding. Belonging breeds branding every time is what he says. People nowadays, I think it may be a product of a lot of working from home and isolation, that people feel they want to belong to communities. So I think if you've got that community, you've got that story around that community, and you've got people that create that bit of pixie dust on top of those fundamentals, that's probably the message. And that's not one thing I know, but there we go. Pixie dust.
Do you sell stuff online? Then you need Omnisend. Yes, that Omnisend, the powerful yet refreshingly intuitive email and SMS tool that helps you make $73 on average for every dollar spent. Like watching steady lines go up and up and up? Just automate your email and SMS campaigns with Omnisend. Set it up once, then sit back and watch the sales roll in while you snooze. You're still awake? Then go to omnisend.com/ECC. Give Omnisend a try and start getting sales so steady they'll definitely put you to sleep. Don't forget to use code ECC30 for a 30% discount. Awesome. So we got a few quick fire rounds, but we've also got some Q&As. And the first one there is for our wonderful Rich Evans. Rich, you gave us some abuse in the comments as well. We won't show those. But what's one common misconception that every founder should immediately forget? I would say forget it when they're building to sell.
Yeah, when they're building to sell, one common. Well, I think, Rich, what got you here won't get you there, because the sales process that you started with at the beginning is not the one that you need to scale. Scaling is about doing more with less, not about doing more of the same and just getting a bigger outcome. So I think, getting that in your head, not do more, not just keep throwing bodies at it, not just keep throwing ads at it, not this. How do we get more for the same or less? That's where I think it goes wrong.
Awesome. So next one. Which type of revenue do investors like the most?
Recurring revenue on long contracts, the longer the better. So it goes in the order of recurring, contracted recurring, repeat revenue, and then one-time revenue. And I have a bit of argument with some investors about repeat revenue. But if you've got a long enough history and can demonstrate that repeat over long enough time, then there's a good case for actually making it valuable. And particularly if you've got that community there as well to support it. So in that order.
Mm.
Cool.
So it doesn't necessarily matter then so much because there was always a lot of debate in e-commerce about subscription versus repeat purchases. What we're saying here is that if there is a long-standing history where you can demonstrate the customers are repeatedly coming back over a protracted period, that could potentially still be, nearly as valuable as a lot of subscribers.
Yeah, so here's the interesting thing. I managed to do that at IPO level and get that, because all accounts are audited by external auditors at IPO. I managed to get that actually approved as a measure that could actually be recorded as part of our valuation. But I do have battles with investors about repeat revenue. But I think, keeping customer records, it's much easier to do it with technology now, but keeping customer records of who's buying what, when, why, and how much, etc. It's really important to do. So yeah, I think look after you. I think subscription revenue obviously is really important, highest value, but repeat customers, let's not cost, what is it, 6, 7, 8 times less to get a new customer. Sorry, 6, 7, 8 times more to get a new customer than to look after an existing one. So your acquisition costs on an existing customer and your profitability of that customer are going to be higher if they're repeat purchasing. That's the story you need to get over to investor. The profitability you're making off each customer.
Thank you.
If you had to launch a startup tomorrow, which niche would you target and why?
If I knew that, I would be doing it. And that is the thing. So, why? What? I would.
Would you though? Would you start again?
Yeah, absolutely. This concept of retirement, I think, is an outdated concept. And after my business was acquired, it was the worst part of my life. I definitely never want to go into a place of not annoying people, I suppose. I wake up mid-sentence in the morning and my energy is off people and business. So that's what I'm going to carry on doing forever. And yeah, I love the squeaky bum moments. They don't faze me. They're scary for everybody, but I just this crack on, the squeaky bum moment, let's crack on. Love it, absolutely love it. So what would I start? It would have to be a recurring revenue business. It would have to be a problem that I could solve. So I would do it as a problem-centric thing. And that's how my business started, was working with people, identifying a common problem. Can I solve that problem? Is the market big enough for me to build a business on the back of that? Which actually I didn't ask when I started mine. I just blindly went ahead and did it. But you know, is the market big enough to build a business? Okay, let's go do it. That's where it would be. And you know, everything that I've learned from modern software that we didn't know, I would apply to that. You know, working with startups and founders in the last 7 years, I've learned more than probably I learned in the 30 years that I was in business. Well, now starting again, really.
Product, software, or people service?
Well, people and services businesses don't scale easily, and they get lower gross margins and lower valuations. So no, I haven't got a lot of time left, so I have to get return on investment quickly. So I want high margin, high multiples. So software or product, anything you can produce and sell at quantity, but products take you, it's got to be on subscription, hasn't it, really? So I tend towards software.
Excuse me. You mentioned multiples. Do you have a quick little cheat sheet for people to understand, like, general range of multiples depending on which niche they're in?
Yes, and I don't have any bullshit multiples either. So
Yeah.
If you have to have the fundamentals in place, right, to get good value, to get good valuation. So, you know, 1 to 2 times revenue if it's one-time type stuff, professional services, you know, short cycle contracts, etc. At best, I'd like to say 4 to 5 times on your recurring, but I've seen investors lowballing at 3 at the minute. And obviously we've all heard 10 to 20 is where we want to be. You know, if you can get that, you've got the right fundamentals in place, you can, but you have
10
to be
to 20
really
multiple on.
Yeah, you have to be good. You have to be good nowadays. Whereas a lot of that was being, you know, pre-COVID, there was a lot of sort of 10 to 20 going on. But sort of 4 to 5, if you get 5 times, you know, anything above 5, and I think you're probably, you know, feeling good, is where I would say at this moment in time, because it's not a great market at the minute. There is money about. The bizarre thing is there is money about, but investors are being very choosy about what they put that money into, and then also being very tight on the valuations. Yeah.
Was that for software, for SaaS?
Yeah, but I think if you've got that's repeatable revenue, I think it's the same thing.
Cool.
I think you get marked down being in e-commerce. To be honest, I think you do.
Yeah. Most overrated metric that founders obsess over?
Revenue. Oh no, actually, change my mind. Social media followers. I see a picture like, we've got this many followers. I'm like, and what are they doing for you? Change my mind.
Does that really still come up?
Oh yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. Cool. Flip side. Most underrated metric that signals a truly healthy business.
Oh my God. I think it's a combination of signals. It is that pixie dust, I think. An underrated signal. I think it must come back to that proposition thing, really, that where they really have nailed it, especially in early stage businesses where most of the time they haven't. But if they really know who that problem is, who that customer is they're solving the problem for, and know how to get them. But to me, the key metrics are about conversion. I mean, conversion to me is the number one metric, I think. It doesn't matter how many leads you generate, if you can't convert them into anything meaningful, you're just wasting a lot of money. So I think conversion is the one that I'd probably land on. And it's a number that most people, when I ask the question, they can't answer it. You know, what's your conversion on X? And I can't answer the question. I don't know the numbers. Knowing your numbers is really important, I think. It signals that you understand that your business is an engine and you've got to keep tuning it.
That's good. I suppose, easy for an e-commerce business because all those metrics are plugged in. But when you get to SaaS and service-based, it becomes tricky because you don't know when you're truly saying that person's a lead and come in and it's actually going to be something that you convert.
I don't agree with that. I think it applies to everything. I think it applies to every business. You know what your stages of your process are, and you should have gates in to know when you're actually prepared to move someone forward and spend more time with them. So yeah, I think, and mind you, HubSpot, perhaps shouldn't say this on your platform, but HubSpot, Salesforce, oh my God, if you want to overcomplicate something, let's do it. Let's spend ages building that. Or pay somebody lots of money to do it, because you just can't see your conversion ratios easily in HubSpot unless you spend a fortune on building it that way. And I think it's really important to know. I worked for Everest Double Glazing, so when poor background, learned to knock on doors. I knew my numbers were, knock on 10 doors, I might actually get 1 pitch. 5 pitches, I might get 3 quotes. 3 quotes, I'm wanting to get 1 or 2 sales out of it. That's what I know. And I used that when I started my own business, and actually got on the train and went to London and knocked on doors to get people. And they were like, nobody knocks on the door and asks for sales. Well, I'm doing it. I didn't know what else to do. But I was still using the same numbers. But I knew those numbers converted. Why are those important? They stop you going crazy, because actually when you're making calls and, or you're reaching out to customers and it's not landing, oh God, this isn't working. But actually, if you know your numbers, it will work. You just got to keep going, and you just got to keep improving what you're doing. So your conversion ratio, it's the most important metric. I absolutely swear it. It saves you wasting a lot of money on customer acquisition costs.
Cool.
Get less leads, convert more, charge them more, upsell them. That's a recipe. 5 magic numbers. Fastest
low-cost growth hack you've ever seen actually work?
Ooh, that's a damn good question. Existing customers. Go back to existing customers. One of my companies doubled his sales in 3 months by going back to his existing customers and representing what he did. And very fortunately he did, because then we had an election that stalled his market, and he got through that on the back of the existing customer.
Oh, wow.
Definitely go back to existing customers. You've already got them. You know who they are. Oh, actually, more important, put the price up. Price, very important.
I know we've run out of time, but we've gone a bit over. But do you want to dig a little bit deeper on it? How do you do that with not affecting your existing customers?
Well, you might affect your existing customers. So I actually sold an eCom business, a tech business, to someone else, and what I'd wanted to do was to actually increase the price to make the existing customer base more profitable, and it hadn't been increased for years. It was a turnaround project. Investor didn't like the idea of that, because it would reduce the ARR, and then they wouldn't want it would fall out of their criteria. So I ended up, I was like, look, this isn't going to work, we'll sell it. Sold it to this guy. He tripled the price, lost the bottom 10%, and he turned it into $1 million of annual recurring revenue, and he's gone on from there. Yeah, you'll lose some, but the ones that you stay with you make more money out of. And usually the bottom end is costing you more money as well. So they're not paying enough, and they're actually more trouble. So, it's old school, sort of chop the bottom off.
Yeah.
One last one to end off. One sentence of advice you'd give to your younger founder self.
Watch out for the company that you keep, and be confident in your own ability, because you're better than you think you are. And I never thought I was any good, and I'm mixed with all the wrong people, which is what happened at school. So there's a lifetime story there. But there you go.
Awesome. That's a cool thing. Thank you so much.
Not one sentence ever, as you can see.
I love how you've just got that one waxed and ready to go as well, because it's clearly you've told yourself this before too.
What? Watch out who you mix with. That's something I've had to learn later in life, actually.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. Look, I think this has been absolutely brilliant. And I think, for the people that are listening and the people that are going to listen to the recording of this, there is so much value to be had here. This is 100% genuine free advice. And I think everybody should be following the stuff that you've been dropping. When's the book coming out? Any way that people can
when
find
I actually finish it. When I actually finish it, but I'm too busy talking to actually put pen to paper is the problem. But actually, what I would say is, if there are any founders in your community, I'm always happy to do an hour with anybody if they want some advice. So, I'm always happy to help. So just let me know.
That's
well, look,
excellent.
you need to jump into the community and put that offer out there as well.
I'll do that.
Yeah. Caitlin can let you in.
Yeah.
I don't know if we let that slip at all on the podcast. So Elizabeth is Caitlin, our community manager's mom.
Yeah.
So
she looks like her dad.
Look, Elizabeth, thank you so much. Really do appreciate you spending the time with us today and just dropping all this knowledge. It's been awesome. Thank you.
Lovely to be with you guys. Thanks for the great questions.
Thanks,
Have a great
Elizabeth.
day. Bye-bye.
Fantastic.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the eCom Collab Club podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, and join our community at ecomcollabclub.com/community.